Hi, my name is Sherry Weir. I'm with Carney & Company. And first and foremost, once again, I would really like to thank our sponsors, SAP, for allowing us to create an event such as this and offer you the opportunity to talk to so many great government executives and industry affiliates. So I'm going to begin. My name is Sherry Weir. I'm a partner with Carney & Company. I always forget that part. But I have the honor of introducing this panel and leading you through it. First of all, Beth Angerman, who is, let's read this correctly, the Executive Director of the Office of Financial Innovation and Transformation, commonly known as FIT. Second, we have Chip Fulham. And Chip was recently nominated by President Barack Obama as the CFO of the Department of Homeland Security. Third, we have Mr. Joe Ward with his soda. Joe is the Director of the Interior Business Center. And last but not least, we have Lori McConnell, who leads the Department of Homeland Security, TSA's National Career Development Program, which is a new initiative and a shared service. And I got that out of order. Okay, so we're doing something a little bit different. I could sit down and start talking to these folks one-on-one, but what we're going to do is we're going to introduce this panel, and they're a bus, right? So there's a caravan of buses setting out for a destination. That destination is a shared services utopia. We're going to call it Orlando, right? Just come on, live with it. So the buses began leaving with passengers from Washington and parts across the U.S. about 10 years ago. And today, this latest bus is beginning its journey. While every bus that left the station had the same destination in mind, they went about it different ways, they took separate paths, and many of them didn't get to their destination. Somehow, though, these buses are all going to get to Orlando, which is the place we want to be, and it's the place where we all have to go. So on the latest bus to Orlando, we have a lot of folks on board. They're all part of a government family, and they all have some of those unique personalities that we find in our own families. So on this bus, we have a navigator who provides support for all of those in the vehicle, helps the driver with directions, controls the climate by adjusting the temperature, offers advice and conversations to help everyone get to their destination safe and sound. And of course, we have a driver. The driver who's supposed to get us there safe and sound seems to know the way and rarely asks directions. We have this teenager in the back seat, and he's got his headphones on. You don't even know why he's there, but he's there, never seeming to pay attention, and always asking, aren't we there yet? Just aren't we there yet? There's Uncle Pete. He sleeps the majority of the trip. He's often confused as to where we are, but he knows eventually they're going someplace fun. And then finally, strangely enough on this journey, we have a stowaway. We're not quite sure why they're there, but they seem to have believed Orlando's been their destination in the past, and they don't mind being on this bus. So first, we're going to talk about how each of our passengers relates to our bus trip, all right? So Chip, talk to us a little bit about why you're on the bus.
Okay, well, I was asleep. I think I was a sleep guy. But now that you've woken me up. So I'm on the bus for a simple reason as it relates to our systems, and we'll go ahead and talk a little bit about that. And that's because the systems we have today don't work. They're not modern, they're highly customized, and in some cases, when you plug them in, they don't come on. and that's bad. So we have two choices. I could have gotten on my own bus and built the bus, gassed up the bus, and done all of those things, or I can get on a bus with other folks. And when you get on a bus with other folks, it typically costs less because I got other people riding along with me. So, I believe in the driver. I believe the driver knows where he's going and is going to get us there, and we have an excellent cruise director. So, I believe it's the absolute right thing to do, to get on the bus, so I'm on it.
Well, that's nice. So you're one happy passenger on the bus.
Didn't say I was a happy passenger.
You're on that bus.
But I'm on the bus.
So Lori, why are you on this bus?
I'm the stowaway. I'm the stowaway with a story. So before everyone boarded this particular bus, and I've been to Orlando before, I got on the bus and hid in the back, hoping to bring some insights into the customer's perspective and building important relationships with your shared services partner, really honing in on the team that you're creating. That's why I'm on the bus.
Interesting. So when you talk about you're on the bus to create and to tell them about a story of creating a relationship, what was so important about creating a relationship with your bus driver on your earlier trip that made the trip worth taking even once again?
Thank you. On our earlier trip, we had a contract with a provider for about 10 years or so. We had been making trips to Orlando back and forth. We knew Highway 4 very, very well. Saw the Mickey ears, knew the path very, very well. And at one point last year, we determined that we needed to look at other ways. We needed to expand our ways of looking at contracting relationships, looking at other service providers. And we decided to enter into a partnership through an IAA. We had only had an interagency agreement before with the Office of Personnel Management. So it was a pleasure to establish and maintain an interagency agreement with Federal Occupational Health. I manage for the Transportation Security Administration our career coaching services. So what we do is provide TSA employees with career counseling, interviewing skills, resume writing skills, and a host of other career coaching and counseling services. And this was really a first for us in having a shared service provider on board the bus with us. It made the trip much easier. We've been in our partnership now for about a year. We've seen great synergy, not only in service delivery and in meeting the needs of our customers and those TSA agents at the checkpoints when you go to the airports, but also in learning how to communicate well and how we all bring our strengths to the table, and starting with yes whenever there's an issue or concern. It's been a great ride, and I thought I would share some of those lessons with some of my riders.
So Joe, talk to us about what it feels like to drive a bus.
Well, first of all, I've never driven a bus this large before, but I do know how to drive a bus. In fact, I've driven 17 other buses of numbers of people successfully in the past. And that gives me the confidence that I have the ability to drive a bigger bus, even though the scale is different, because the same repeatable processes that I used to successfully onboard those other 17 caravans of people, we will use with some tweaking to drive this caravan of people to Orlando. And so what I would say is that there are differences between groups of passengers for sure. And oh, by the way, I was asleep too, but Chip snoring woke me up. So. But the bottom line is one of the advantages of having an experienced driver is that you know they have the capability of getting you to your destination safely, securely, and on time. And so the reason I'm on the bus and the reason I happen to be driving the bus is because I believe in success, and I believe in the success of my team, several members here in the audience, and I also believe in good government and creating efficiencies and being effective, et cetera.
Excellent. So Beth, what are you doing on this bus?
So, some of you might find this surprising, given that I'm female, but I actually am the navigator on the bus. And I think because I agree with everything that the panel has said, good government, the right direction, this is where we really have no choice but to go. But to Joe's point, this is the first time we've ever really driven a bus this big, and we fully expect that we're probably going to go the wrong way a couple of times, and we're going to hit a few bumps along the way. And my role on the bus is to try to keep us all focused on getting to Orlando. I'm going to try not to let anybody try to get off the bus as we're along the way, and as we take our pit stops, which we will take. And really trying to make sure that as we overcome some of the challenges that we will face, that we set a good path for those that will come behind us as well. And so making sure that we have created process, repeatable processes, and documented lessons learned for this bus and other buses that are headed in the same direction, so that we can hopefully make this an easier process going forward.
Excellent. So everybody's got a spot on this bus, and they all recognize that the road may have a few bumps and turns and twists, but some of the things that we all want to know is, what role does industry play? Joe, do you have some idea there?
Sure, that's a great question, and a question that's been asked more than once. And my answer is the same. Industry plays a huge role. There have been some folks that would suggest that industry's been left out of this initiative, and nothing could be further from the truth. Industry and government are partners in this initiative, and they have been from the beginning, and in my humble opinion, they will be throughout the process. For example, in my particular case, and it's a little different for every provider, but in my particular case, industry is 80% of the solution, and 20% of the solution in a typical implementation is government. That changes a little bit once we get an O&M and sustainment, but during an implementation, industry's right there with best practices, with proven experience, with thought leadership, et cetera, et cetera. So the bottom line is, industry is right in the mix, and as far as I'm concerned, will be.
Excellent. So Beth, just right back to you. Industry does play a huge role, as Joe says, but in your perspective, what is the best role for industry when it comes to keeping the buses rolling to Orlando?
So this is a good question. I think that we've identified definite, clear roles for industry as we've been on this journey for the last few years. But I wouldn't say that we've kind of decided officially that that's the only role, right? So we've identified things like providing project management support, both to customers and to providers. We've identified things like IV&V work, right? We've identified opportunities for, we know that you can't bring bad data into a shared environment. So there's an opportunity for data cleansing. There's opportunities for helping, as Joe said, to be integrators onto these solutions. So those are kind of some of the very tactical things we've seen industry help us with as we're moving down this path. Is that it? I don't think so. But one of the asks that I always have of industry is, if you guys are thinking that there's some other way that you can help, I mean, we get a lot of criticism, as Joe said, that we might be squeezing industry out. If there are tools out there, or there are things out there or thought leadership that we might be able to use to better craft our vision, or if there are tools out there that might be of help to the actual implementations, we're always open to feedback in that space.
Awesome. So Chip, for you, We heard earlier today in a lot of our speakers expressed a reluctance to lose control of the process, either through acquisitions, not really understanding how things are going, or from the CFO losing visibility of their funding after it leaves the agency into an interagency agreement. With FIT taking this role of oversight, what is your opinion, at least of the governance process that's going into place?
So it's, first of all, it's still a work in progress. I don't think we're there yet. You know, I view them as sort of the regulator in terms of helping us not only arbitrate on those rare occasions where there's a need for arbitration, but they're the ones that will help us get all the visibility we need. As far as the reluctance goes, this whole thing of wanting to own it, I got to own it. You know, in our agency, much like many others, you know, the core competencies, the missions that we do aren't this. So one of the reasons why we are looking to go to a shared service solution is it gets us better value at less cost. And I firmly believe that, while we'll still get all the same benefits. I mean, that's sort of to me like sort of a wives' tale, if you will. I think we'll get all the same visibility in terms of cost. I'm not worried at all about our systems. As he said, we've talked to 17 other riders in the smaller buses. I mean, we went and talked to them. And when you talk to them, you start to settle down in terms of, hey, it'll be okay. You'll get the same visibility. A little less control, maybe, but not really, because the control's right over here. And when we don't like something, that's when we're going to come to her and engage that way. But again, I think that is going to be few and far between. So far, I think it's gone pretty well. I mean, have there been bumps along the road? Yes. Did we take a wrong exit or two? Yeah. But we got right back on track, and it's because at the end of the day, there's tremendous leadership in IBC, and there's tremendous leadership in FIT and OMB, and that makes all the difference. And there is a commitment amongst the three of us to make it work. And that's what I tell our components all the time is we have to be committed to make this work. And because when you look behind, I always tell them, look behind door number 2 and door number 3. There's nothing better behind door number 2. There's nothing better behind door number 3. So this idea of, but there's something better out there, there's not. This is a state-of-the-market solution. It's the absolute right thing to do, and we just got to stay the course and stay committed. And remember, and this is the other thing I've told our folks, is you need to remember, when you've done this before, it's never gone well. I mean, there have been bumps along the road every time we do this. Anytime you say the words data and migration in the same sentence, it's going to be hard. I mean, there's going to be problems with it. So I continue to remind them that, hey, you know, when we've done this before, we had challenges, we had problems, but we worked our way through it. We just need to do it again.
Lori, you're on this bus to talk to us a little bit about, you know, some of the lessons you learned, but you had a solution. You went to your provider. If you could offer one suggestion, what really would it be? What is the most important lesson you learned at the conclusion of your transformation or as it's ongoing? What is the most important lesson you've learned?
The importance of building relationships. I can't stress that enough. And we all have a commitment. We're all heading in the same direction. This is all to head to Orlando for sure, but the importance of building and cultivating relationships and forming a team, knowing that your solutions and the things that you strive for are always win-win. So when I talked before about starting with yes, I meant that. I meant that we look at concerns as shared concerns. We don't say that we have problems. We call them challenges, and then we turn them into opportunities. So we cultivate sort of a mindset of getting to yes and making sure that we communicate. We're all on the same page. We're all on the bus together. You know, some may not like the speed the driver's going. Some may want the windows rolled down. Some may say, I have to get off at the next exit. Some are preoccupied, but whatever it is, we're all on the same bus and we're committed. And again, just communicating and building that team and resolving all of your differences, seeing them as opportunities to move the team and move the program forward at the end of the day. Got to have that commitment to authentic relationships.
Okay. So Joe, now you've gone through the FAME process, right? And this is something that has been worked on for a long time, is published now, and is available so that agencies can fully comprehend it. But if you were to tell that next agency, these are the lessons we've really learned, and you know, these are things you can do to prepare, what would it be from your perspective?
Well, I don't know if we have enough time for me to explain all of them.
Just give us a few.
But I guess a few would be certainly one of the largest lessons that I think we learned as a team in our work with Chip and his folks at DHS was we've been dating, actually before Chip even got in the seat that he's in, but we've been dating DHS and several other components now since 2012-ish. I want to say around October 2012, we were in discussions with DHS, and they asked us for a ROM on what it would take to migrate these three components, and so we gave them a ROM, and that ROM was based on I think it was like a 9-page survey. There wasn't a whole lot of work that went behind that because we didn't have a discovery agreement or an implementation agreement or anything like that, and that was a mistake. Okay. So going forward, what I would share with any future providers that want to get in this game is that whatever number you give a client, whether it's DHS or somebody else, even if it's 2 years gone, that's what they remember. Okay, and that's where the expectation is set. And so even though we caveated that ROM saying after 12 months it's no longer valid and we didn't do our due diligence, this is just, you know, something you asked for, you didn't have to pay for it, anything like that, folks remember what you gave them at first. And so when we came back 2 years later and we went through a 6-month or longer discovery process, we validated requirements, did the gap analysis, and all that other good stuff, a much thorough investigation of their requirements and our system and what it would cost. Of course, the ROM that we gave them then was much more realistic. But all they remember is the first one. So I could go on, but that would probably be the biggest lesson learned that our team used, because quite frankly, with the 17 other smaller clients, that worked perfectly fine. We didn't have, to my knowledge, any challenges with that because it worked in the past. However, now you got a larger bus you're driving, and you need to tweak your systems and your repeatable processes to fit the larger bus and all the things required to maintain that bus. So that would probably be my biggest lesson.
Okay. Chip, I'm going to ask you for a lesson, and then I'm going to let Beth talk about her lessons.
So, yeah, we've described this in a lot of different ways, and one of them is dating to a marriage, and you know, we went on 6 months worth of real dates, you know, through the discovery process, and it was a love-in. I mean, you know, it was just, oh, we were a match made in heaven. Right up until the 30th of April, when he sent me the marriage contract. And so what he's talking about is cost. And so a couple things that I would add to what Joe said is, never put you guys know CFOs, you never put a number in front of a CFO that you don't want him to remember, because he's gonna, especially if it's a good one. And so that did happen. But the other thing that happened during discovery is that people went shopping. And because they liked the solution. So instead of 5 reports, we asked for 17 reports. In one case. In another, we asked for significantly more. Well, he then came back in his marriage proposal and said, this is what you get. And we were like, whoa. And then the last lesson that we have learned to date is, and so there needs to be communication back and forth, clear communication about what the expectation is. But the last thing we've learned is that a couple of the significant drivers we left out, because we made some assumptions about what we could use in terms of licensing that just didn't work for us. And so you really got to do forensics on cost and really get in and understand, and sort of what we did was sort of bucketize them. Well, we went shopping here, we left this out, and this was just an oops. So once you did that, and once we had that understanding, we were back on track. But for a little bit there, you know, the marriage was a little bit, you know, all marriages hit rough patches, right? So, you know, we hit one on the 30th of April, but we're past that now.
So Beth, you played the matchmaker, and I'm sure you learned a few lessons from that experience. I'd like you to tell us a little bit about that experience, but then tell us about the next phase. What happens next?
So I want to make sure everybody understands that matchmaker doesn't mean that I picked who their next husband or wife was going to be. That by matchmaker, I gave them a list of who, I gave Chip a list of who he could talk to, maybe date, and then DHS ultimately makes the decision based on, I think, and Chip can correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of this doesn't come down to, I like this system better than that one. A lot of it comes down to, just like in dating, chemistry and people. And I think, as Lori said, relationships. And you know, this is a journey we're going to be on together for a while, and you want to pick the right partner when you're going on this journey. And so I think I want to make sure everybody walks away with a message that truly being a matchmaker really just means, you know, we know the landscape, we know who the agencies are, who the providers are currently working with, we know who has capacity to take other providers, so we can make sure that when you're having discussions about who a provider may be for your agency, given your time frame, that you're talking to the people who actually may be able to support you. But ultimately, the decision on where you go is the customer's decision. So I would say that key lessons learned for us so far really are, one, that, and I think Dave Liebrick made this point, and so did several other panelists after him, that leadership at both the agency, the customer, and their provider agencies is, I don't know if this word is even strong enough, but is critical to success, because the leadership sets the tone and the expectations, and that has to trickle down in your organization, because change is hard, and this is bigger than change. This is about changing culture. Right? Things that we always did, we may not do anymore. And having leadership that's strong enough to say, this is the direction we're going, this is our goal, this is our vision, and we're planning to do X, Y, and Z in order to recognize that vision. That's critical. And these relationships shouldn't start if we don't have that leadership in place. The second one I would say is I think, a good example of how Chip and Joe have worked together, and their teams have worked so well together. And that is that while Chip says they went shopping, they acknowledged that in that discovery process, where they were able to sit down with Joe, and they were able to say, okay, this is Joe's standard solution, and these are DHS's requirements. And where are the gaps, right? Yep. And it turns out that as a result of that discovery, there were about 50 gaps. And almost, I'm going to say 45, and I could be wrong by one or two, were addressed by business process change, not by system changes. So Joe isn't changing his system to address some of these issues or these gaps that existed between the current processes at DHS and Joe's system. And that's part of the guiding principle of shared services, which is you have to be okay with standard solutions. And if you're going to deviate from that standard solution, it has to be supported by some legislative or some requirement that you have, right, that isn't, this is Kathleen's point from earlier, isn't something that just management has gotten accustomed to having, but is actually something that is legally or statutorily required for that agency to have. And so I think setting that guiding principle and understanding that as a customer is really critical to moving forward. And then my last lesson learned is really transparency from my office in terms of lessons learned and in terms of guidance. So I will tell you that I think there are certain things that really need to be in place before agencies and customers and providers start discovery. And there are other things that need to be in place before they begin implementation. And what we'll see is if they don't have things in place like PMO support, however they're doing it, whether they're contracting out PMO support or they're doing it in-house, they need to have that support and that structure in place. They need to have that IVMV contractor on board. It's not something that we can wait for, because what I found is we know the dates before we ever do the plans. We know when these systems are going to fail on us. And so it's a little bit backwards, right? And what we really need to do is we need to make sure that before we start these implementations, we've got some of these things in place. Governance. Not governance, my governance, not governance of the marketplace, but governance within the customers and within the providers to be able to make decisions quickly so that they don't hamper our ability to make these dates. So those are some examples, and we're putting out some guidance hopefully this fall that will identify for each one of these phases what the best practices really need to be and what things that these two agencies really need to do to prepare for the next phase.
So if I could add to what she said, the fundamental foundation of this process is adaptability. And this is not the typical customer supplier where I go to the supplier and say, here are my needs, you do what I asked you to do. It is exactly what she said, which is process adaptability. Is Joe's business process good enough for us? I know everyone's special, so you have to get over that culture of we're all special. And really go in with as a fundamental premise, I am going to adapt. He's got a process, and if it produces the basic outcome that I'm looking for, I'm good with that. So that's one. The other thing that I should have mentioned is strong governance internally. We have a very robust governance structure internally that has aided us immeasurably in getting to this point. Where we have the components together sitting and they do a lot of, beating about things to get to a common ground and a common solution that they bring to the next level. But that strong internal governance is key for us to be successful. But you can't foot stomp enough the culture of adaptability that you have to be willing to do when you go to a shared service solution.
So Chip, one more question on that though. We heard today a lot of emphasis on the impact to the people of the organization, that the implementation of a shared service doesn't just impact the way your organization is going to hug its servers, but it's really going to change the people and the processes inherently. How are you addressing that over and above what you're doing to transition?
So I think there's a huge change management issue here that you have to address up front, and we're doing that. Particularly as it relates to the Coast Guard, this is a huge change management for them, and it's outside, as you guys well know, this isn't a CFO thing. This is a CIO, as well as a procurement, as well as asset management. So you have to have all of those folks on the same page and have the same vision and the same path forward. So that's taken, again, we keep using the same words, leadership. You have to have the right leadership and the right vision at the top in all of those lines of business, which we're blessed to have. But then you have to have a whole change management plan and process because you are changing business processes, and our components have recognized that. They're out in front of that in terms of change management, and they have a good path forward as it relates to not only the basics of training people on how to use a new system, but the whole process change and making sure that that's communicated out, and the leadership in those components, not only the CFOs, but the leadership in those components have bought into that as well.
Okay. Joe, any other last words before I start opening it up to the floor for some questions?
I think the only thing I would add is, I mean, I agree with everything Chip said and the rest of the panel members. The whole idea of change management is key. Flexibility is the key to air power. Several airmen are in the audience here and know what I mean by that. But you have to be flexible, and you have to be adaptable. I believe it was Henry Ford that said, if you think you can, and if you think you can't, you can't. And on every bus, you'll have some people that think they can't, but with the proper leadership and support, you can get enough of those people to think they can't, to think that they can, and I think that's critical. So I would say that, and finally, the last thing I would say is that Chip's got it right, and not just because we have a professional relationship, but because if you're at a cabinet level agency and you're a CFO or CIO or Chief Administrative Officer or whatever the case may be, realistically, I don't know of any cabinet level agency that has a mission of shared services. DHS does not. Agriculture does not. Interior does not. Commerce does not. They all have different missions. And my truth is that if you're in one of those cabinet level agencies or another, then guess what? You should probably be focusing on whatever your core mission is. In the back office support stuff, like financial systems modernization and payroll and life cycle cradle to grave acquisition support, you ought to look to a provider like myself, where I see PSCs in the audience and I know ESCs back there. You need to look for one of us to provide those services for you.
Lori, any last words? No. I love that answer. See, she learned how to say no. Any questions in the audience? Yes, we have some up front.
So, according to GAO, there are 580 financial management systems in government costing $2.7 billion each year. So the question is that, so shared services is a welcome solution to that. The question is 4 the right number? And presumably some of those 4 may not be able to meet the service level agreement by the customers. And if all those 4 use the same industry partner sort of solutions, then there's a question of diversity of solutions as well to mitigate the risk factors. So my question is to the Treasury, Beth. Basically, what are your thoughts regarding ensuring there is a sufficient diversity in solutions among those shared services centers, with understanding that everybody will try to meet the customer needs and to do everything to support them sufficiently, but we have to think about some of the contingencies by which some clients may choose to go to different shared service provider at some point, and what are those steps?
So I think there are a couple of questions in there, so I'll try to answer them. I think the first one is for the right number. For right now, 4 is the right number because we had 4 agencies apply to be shared service providers who met the requirements we set forth as part of that process. Are we wed to this number? No. Do we want it to be a larger number? We don't want it to be 24, right? And what we know right now is that we need to balance supply and demand. So if we need to revisit that number over the course of the next few years as supply or as demand may increase, we'll certainly do that. But we're starting here in hopes that we can achieve this long-term vision of reducing the number of systems. As for the diversity, honestly, we did not, these agencies applied because they provide a service. How they deliver that service or what tools they use or what software they use is up to that agency. What we're really focusing on here, and it's kind of outcome-based, and it goes back to the process, which is, They need to be able to produce the following things that will meet the requirements of financial management today, right? Basic, they need to be able to provide payment files, they need to do collections, they need to do reporting, they need to do budget functions. And so how they actually determine the delivery of that service, we leave that up to the provider so that we can actually leave the door open for things like innovation, right? So that the providers can decide which tools or which products they actually want to offer. And so that's kind of where we leave the door open to diversity there, is because we're ultimately just saying these agencies can deliver these services. How they choose to do that is up to them.
More questions?
David Basler from Infosys. What do you see in upcoming years, in the next 5 years, with regard to the volume of the contract or business that will go through these shared services centers? Any projections?
Who's that question for? Anybody?
For me.
Well, let's start with Joe then.
Can you repeat the question?
What do you see the volume of the contracts that will go through shared services centers? Do you see increase in that? What kind of projections you have internally among your agencies?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I see increases. If you look at the financial management line of business and the market penetration that we have today, my colleague, the director at PSC, and others agree that probably we've got 10% of the market. It's different in HR, where we have 95% of the market between 4 payroll providers, of which we're one of them, but it's different in the financial management line of business. This is the first effort with M1308 where any of us have even seriously talked to a cabinet level agency, because in the past we've all migrated small and medium-sized agencies. So in terms of the increasing the volume that's going to go through a federal shared service provider over the next 3 to 5 and more years, I see it going through the roof, because with us, as is true with ESC in the back and others, this is not the only cabinet level agency that we're going to migrate over the next 5 to 10 years. There will be others. And so for me, in the business center with one of my 3 lines of business, which is financial management, whatever our revenue is today, which we generate based on these interagency agreements with these agencies, it's going to go through the roof over the next 3 to 5 years.
You're already talking about somebody else.
After we take care of you.
Hey, can I say one thing
Please do.
to him? I think one of the things that we really need to think about, though, is that as far as shared services go, financial management and HR are out here. One of the things that we struggle with, and she's heard from me, is that procurement has a lot of procurement systems. Asset management, we have a lot of different systems, so that adds complexity when we're looking for a shared service provider, because we want integration. And so as we're going down this path, I've suggested to her that others need to get on and go down the same path, because it would make, if it was an integrated process where we're all going down the same path, I think it would take away a lot of the complexity that we have today in terms of looking for integrated solutions for asset management as well as procurement. So I think the other lines of business need to move forward as well.
So I think that the panel has given you a lot of information and a lot of things to think about. A few housekeeping things, but first, I would like to thank them for allowing me to share their bus. I think that Chip is now talking about a wide-body jetliner.